One of the things that I decided this year is that I want to let you guys in on a little bit about me and where I'm at and my story. And today I'm feeling a little heavy because we had to put down one of our sweet dogs. And it was just a very emotional and is still a very emotional time for me. But it's also mixed with some joy because a couple of days ago, I celebrated 21 years of sobriety. So it's just this crazy ride that we're on. When we don't drink, we feel the feeling so much more. And part of the journey, I feel like, is to really understand and be able to name these emotions and feel them all the way, even if it's as painful as losing our dear sweet Kaya is, so that we can be fully authentic. And that's kind of a great lead in to where we're going today, because what if the part of your story that you've been taught to edit out, the messy, the tender, the unpolished, is actually the part that's most worth telling? Today's guest helps people find the exact right language to connect with others, and she knows firsthand how owning your voice, instead of hiding it or shaping it for approval, can be the difference between quiet survival and real impact. This episode isn't going to be a how-to workshop. It's a conversation about why your story matters and how embracing it, not sanitizing it, can become the very thing that helps others to feel seen. If you're sober and there's still a part of your experience you haven't shared because you don't think it fits in to your professional life, where you wonder how to tell your story without sounding too dramatic or too vulnerable or too real, you are in the right place. Welcome to Sober Life Rocks, the podcast for people who have walked through addiction, loss, identity collapse, or quiet rebuilding, and are now navigating what it means to use their sober voice in the world. This isn't just about sobriety, it's about how your story intersects with your work, your calling, your message, and your identity. It's for the person who has thought, if I tell my story, people will judge me. Or I don't really want attention on myself. I just want to help. Or my story isn't interesting enough. Here's the thing. Your voice matters precisely because it's yours, not because it fits a template. And today's guest helps people uncover and own that truth in all kinds of contexts, including business and storytelling. I'm your host, Margie Schaller, and I'm really glad that you're here. Dawn, is it Apuan?
Apuan. Mm-hmm.
Apuan. Dawn Apuan is a copywriter, a brand storyteller, and strategist, but that's not where her story begins. Before stepping into the world of messaging and marketing, Dawn spent a decade working with people in addiction, recovery, and sobriety, holding stories most of the world never sees, and learning firsthand how much power there is in being witnessed. Today, she helps businesses and leaders find words that actually sound like them. But woven through it all is a lived understanding of recovery, identity, and the quiet courage it takes to tell the truth, especially in professional spaces. Dawn, welcome to Sober Life Rocks.
Thank you so much. Very excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Now, you and I don't know each other. You reached out to me on LinkedIn, which was amazing. So I want to know, to start with, as I read in the bio, you spent time working with people in addiction and recovery. Are you yourself sober?
I'm not actually, well, yes, I am, but I was never a drinker. So I don't, congrats on 21 years, by the way. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I've celebrated many, many people over the years, and I know it's not an easy journey. So that is an amazing milestone for you. But myself, no, I guess the one drink I've ever taken is one sip of a strawberry margarita.
Oh,
and I was like, ugh, that is so gross. My brother was like, I was graduating from college where, as I mentioned, I made a commitment during my college years not to drink and turned 21 during that time. So I'd never had a drink. And on my graduation weekend, my brother bought a strawberry margarita. I took one tiny sip and I was like, that's disgusting. I was like, that just tastes horrible. And he's like, it tastes like strawberries. It's like, no. So that is my one experience with alcohol my entire life.
Wow. That's really interesting. My stepmother is the same way. She never drank. She took a drink. I think she said a sip of a grasshopper, hated it, and never
I don't
drank
even know what
since.
that is.
Yeah. So how was it then, like that you came to work with people in recovery?
Yeah, great question. So after college, I went to seminary and became a pastor as part of the Salvation Army. And the Salvation Army, if you don't know, does a lot with drug and alcohol addicts. Many people are aware of their thrift stores, but what they don't know is that the thrift stores fund drug and alcohol recovery programs.
Mm,
And those recovery programs actually have a 28% success rate, which is far higher than any other programs, at least that I'm aware of, in the country. So that's how I got involved, is because I was the executive director in our county with the Salvation Army. And then we just had a lot of people in both struggling with addiction as well as on the other side in AA groups or NA groups and things like that.
it must have been really interesting for you, having never drank, to then be having these interactions. What was that like?
That was interesting because on one level, I couldn't exactly relate, right? I don't know what it's like to feel drunk. Um, it never was a temptation to me, and that probably in some ways was helpful. You know, talking with people, it wasn't like I was ever tempted to go into that lifestyle. But the challenge was that I felt sometimes like they maybe didn't trust me or couldn't relate because it was just such a foreign concept to both of us. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what it was like to be under the influence or to struggle to say no to something like that. And they also did not know what it was like to be someone like me who's never had a drink. So we had some very interesting conversations over time, right? And yeah, I think I just came at it with an openness to learn about them and love them where they were at, even though I couldn't necessarily relate. I more related to them on like the other challenges in life, right? A lot of them had trauma. A lot of them had abuse as children. A lot of them had parents who were abusive, and they also were addicts of drugs, alcohol, or both, which my parents weren't in that stage either. So that was always the biggest challenge, though, was just that I couldn't relate to that part, but I could relate to their pain because I had a pretty tough childhood. So in other ways,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and that's always where I tried to just love them where they were at.
And when you think back to some of those interactions, what what did you learn about how people tell their own stories to themselves?
I love that question. Makes me think of the quote, you can't believe everything you think. Because I think not to say that pain isn't real and trauma didn't happen as kids, but I think we really distort it by the time we're adults. And it can be, yeah, maybe we believed things that weren't necessarily real or weren't the intention, right? Like, let's say your parents were alcoholics, and so because they were drunk all the time, you were left on your own to kind of fend for yourself. You could interpret that very many ways, right? You could interpret that as I'm not loved, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. Or you could see it another way of like, they're struggling with their own demons and they did the best they could, but they were also under the influence. Like, it just, what I saw was people could really go two directions. And, some people really got caught in that victim mode of, woe is me. Like, it's my parents' fault. My mom did this. My dad did that. Or there were people who were like, yeah, life was hard, but I want to make a change. I want to do something different with my life now. I screwed up and they want to make a change. So I think there's so much about what we believe about our story. And I always say, if you change your mind, you can change your life. And it's a choice. It's always a choice. I'm not negating that hard things happen,
Yeah.
but it's still a choice.
I've shared a couple times on the show that, AA is the only thing that was available to me when I got sober. And so I did all the things wholeheartedly. And I do believe that AA, helped save my life. But there came a time when I needed something else because I didn't drink to get drunk. Some people do. Some people, like, that's their whole goal. I drank as a stress reliever. And so eventually I found adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families, better known as ACA. And that's where my work really began because I also had an alcoholic mother. And the stories that I not only told myself, but also the survival skills that I adapted and then adopted became part of the fiber of who I am today. And I've had to I've spent the past decade kind of unpacking and looking at all of that and the stories that I, through a child's lens, told myself weren't altogether true, for sure. And just like you said, my mom was just not capable of being there for me the way that a mother should be. She was also raised by a mother who had incredibly high expectations for her, and she knew no other way than to put that on me. And so today I can look back on that with empathy for her, but at the same time, the effect was real.
Yeah.
And so
sure.
I think that's part of what the work is to understand, can we shift the lens through which we're looking at things without discarding the real damage that was done?
Exactly.
And then being able to work through and make new decisions about what to do with that damage.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think there's something to be said for resiliency, right? You took in, beliefs, or you formed beliefs based on your situation, and that got you through to adulthood, right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to just like bless and cherish and treasure that little person in us who made it to adulthood. But then it's like, okay, the child part of us does not function well as an adult. And I think there's a lot of children running around as adults now because we don't heal those wounds. We use those same coping mechanisms that helped us survive. Well done. But then we find in adulthood that we don't need that survival anymore. We really need to grow up in the sense of, realizing, okay, this happened, but now what? Now what do I do?
1,000%. Just to make that very, very concrete, as the oldest of my family, I had to make sure that things went well in the household because my mom didn't. I had to get me and my brother up and feed us breakfast at 10 years old and make sure we got to the bus and all of those things. It turned me into something of a control freak. Which in my young adulthood didn't serve me well. People didn't particularly like the fact that I was trying to manage and control their lives as well as my life. And so part of the work has been understand where that's coming from, why it's triggered, when it comes up in me, and to dial that back. But that being said, the very skills that I learned make me an incredible project manager, because I can foresee all the things that might happen, plan for them, and then try to execute to the best of my ability. So it's not like throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's what isn't working for me in my adulthood, what aspect of that, and then what aspect is. Yeah. So, and that kind of takes me really to where I want to take this conversation, which is a lot of our listeners are people who are trying to navigate their professional lives as sober people. We talk a lot on this show about, do we How do we navigate going to company happy hours? Or how do we navigate if you're a salesperson taking people out to the restaurant and dealing with, here comes the wine list. But there's also that aspect of, how can we show up as sober people and just normalize the conversation, just be able to be open about our choices. And so one of the things that intrigued me about you was this idea of being a storyteller. And so I want to ask first, from your perspective, what happens when people edit out the most meaningful part of their story in the name of being professional?
Oh, so good. What happens? I think what we do is we rob people of being inspired and being blessed by our story. When we take out the parts that really could provide, like I said, inspiration or a little teaching without being, like a nagging teacher type person, but the gold nuggets that are in the hard parts of our story, that's how we grew and changed and became who we are today. And I think when we share that, we inspire others to also reflect and make different choices and things like that. So I think there's just a
Okay,
real
but
loss.
yeah, but there's also probably a really interesting nuance between oversharing
Mm.
and sharing our truth and vulnerability and journey. So, can you help unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So my goodness, oversharing makes me just think of Facebook. I was like, oh my gosh, we don't need to know all your dirty laundry. And I think that comes down to then awareness. Like, obviously, you have gone on a journey to be aware of what happened in your childhood. You've processed that. And maybe that's the difference is I don't recommend that people share stuff when they're in the middle of the muddle, as Tolkien would say. Because you're still in the messy middle. You're still trying to figure things out. If things are raw and painful, you're probably going to say things that you might regret later. But if you've done the healing work and if you can kind of step back and say, okay, like here's what happened, here's what I learned, here's how I can inspire others, or that's a different conversation to me than when you're in it. You're going to have that self-awareness and that filter, I guess, when you're not still in the emotions of it. So that is definitely how I would, say, okay, if you're still in that trying to figure it out, that's probably not a time to share.
Yeah.
But when you've done the work, then I think we can be that light or that resource. I know in AA, there's sponsors. It's a big thing. It's like having somebody else come alongside you who also shares their story because they've lived it, and they're not in it anymore, right? That's the difference than, say, maybe somebody else who has the same number of sober days as you and is going to the AA meetings. Like, that's the difference, right? You don't use them as your sponsor, your mentor, because they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me, we just got done with our very first conference called Amplify Sober Voices. And one of our speakers was Annie Grace, who wrote This Naked Mind. And she's a luminary in the sober space today. And she was talking about, how to write a book that has impact. And she said something very similar. She said, while you're going through the things, journal like crazy, capture it all. Capture the highs, the lows, the crazy, the voices in your head, the pain, the aha moments. Capture it all. But don't publish that.
Exactly.
She said, wait until you're through the messy middle. Wait until you've done the processing. Wait until you have perspective to look back and then open those journals because gold is in there. But the discernment of how and what to share, you're not ready for when you're in that place.
100%.
And so I really, really love that. And, in my opening today, I talked about the death of my dog, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be ready for that, but I am through the hysterical weeping stage, which is where I was a couple of days ago, and to the point where I just felt that it's important that people know that I'm human too, and that I have,
Right.
the days that you think to yourself, I don't know how I'm going to do this. The good news is, with the muscle memory I've built up over 21 years, I didn't feel the need to drink to cover those emotions.
Mhm.
But those are the sorts of times that I used to be fearful of.
Mhm.
Okay, so one of the things that I kind of want to unpack is from the point of view of let's say it's somebody who is in sales, or maybe it's an entrepreneur, and they're doing either blog writing or something where they're trying to help people appreciate who they are, because we know that people do business with people that they know, like, and trust.
Exactly.
How do you recommend people sort of integrate their part of themselves that is vulnerable without it being like, I don't want people to like pity me, or I don't want to have people, I don't want this to become my identity. I don't want people to think of me as that person. But at the
Yeah.
same time, we do want to have people know, like, and trust us. So how do we do that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to show the humanity side, like sharing your struggle with alcohol and sobriety, that journey, sharing about your dog. Those, like, and trust someone when you kind of see a peek into like behind the curtain, sort of. Right. And again, this goes back to like having a filter, and you're not like throwing the curtains open and just showing, the fight with your husband and, whatever, whatever, whatever. But having the ability to, I know some people stay like so professional and so vanilla that people feel like they don't know them, right? Because everything just feels like this clean, perfect Instagram highlight reel. And the truth is, if you're a consumer or a potential client, you're looking at that and you might put that person way up on a pedestal, like you're down here and they're up here because they seem perfect, right? And when you have that, that person looks at you up on a pedestal and then they feel like, oh, I'm not worthy of that. I'll never be like that person. And in copywriting or in storytelling and sharing our stories so that we can connect with others, the whole goal is that we have that connection piece of like, I'm like you. Maybe I'm further ahead on my journey. Maybe, you're 21 years sobriety. Maybe someone hears your story and they're at 1 year. So you're further along. Doesn't make you better. It just makes
Yeah,
you
but
at a
Dawn,
different point in the journey.
let's take a super concrete example. Let's say that we're somebody listening is an entrepreneur who they've got a marketing business,
Mm.
and they're writing a blog about some marketing concept. Well, how would they weave something in about the fact that they're sober in a way that becomes relatable but still about marketing?
Ooh, I like that. That's a fun example. So what I would say is, like, from thinking about things in my own life, is you look for ways to find analogies. Like if you're looking at let's see, some things with sobriety that are like um it's always on your mind, or temptation. Maybe you weave in temptation to buy something, or maybe you weave in, um, like if you're sober right now, maybe there are certain things you do about your environment so that you're not tempted, right? So maybe we relate that to entrepreneurship because we create a certain environment so that we further our business along or do needle moving things rather than get distracted by our phone or Facebook or whatever. So that's what I'm always looking for. And whether it's your sobriety or gardening or kids, or, we're all living lives that are way more than just our business. I have like random thought moments where I'm like, oh, that could relate to business. I'm going to do an email about that. And it's about, my kid. Remember when we planted tulip bulbs. And so she's helping me dig the holes and put them in, and we do it all. And she's like, are they going to be flowers tomorrow, mommy? I'm like, no, we need time. And that I did a whole email about marketing and how we plant seeds and then time, aka sunshine and water and different things that you do, and then you reap the harvest later on. It might be months, it might be, we were planting tulips, so we plant in October and they come up in April. So, we had that time lapse, and so I had this whole conversation about time. So I think you just take what's your lived experience with sobriety or temptation or anything around alcohol, and then pull that into a marketing concept. So yeah, I would say sobriety is no different than any other thing that would be happening in your life that you could then relate. Like I was thinking this morning in the shower, I was like, oh, I need to do an email about the Olympics and tying that in since that's going on right now. And because I saw one of my friends was like, oh, the only reason I'm watching the Olympics is this one person because their story is so amazing. And I said, story. We watch because we love, the athleticism is amazing, but our favorites, at least for me and for her, we were like, our favorites are the ones where their story, that they've overcome like insane odds to get to the Olympics. And so you're cheering them on because you're like, oh, they're the underdog, right? So it's really starting to have, I guess, a lens for seeing how we can relate without, again, it's not the messy middle. It's not like I wouldn't share, for example, if you had been sober 21 years and then you drank and got drunk, and then the next day you read an email to your list. Probably not the best timing, but once you processed stuff and you can see the relation, like I think so many things tie into marketing. I'm always seeing, oh, I could talk about this. I see a commercial on TV and I'm, writing an email about it. So that's just what it takes. It's starting to train your brain to see connections. And once you've processed whatever it is, whether it's through sobriety or something else traumatic that's happened in your life. Like I lost my brother to suicide. And so that at the beginning, I could not share. I didn't have pictures up of him anywhere. Like it took process for me to heal. And now I can talk about it and now I can share. And now, people will say, oh, I was really inspired by your story and that traumatic experience, but I wasn't talking, like it's been 15 years. So It's been a long time for me to get to the point where I can, and it's an important part of my journey and my story and why I do what I do today. But I wasn't in that place. Even when I started my business, which was many years ago, at that point, it was like I was almost ashamed. There's a lot of stigma about that as well, mental health and suicide. And so it was very much like, you don't talk about those things, kind of like you were implying with sobriety as well. And I think it's an opportunity for us to be bold and to share the reality of our humanness so that others can see that and, again, be inspired by it in their life, whether it's to quit drinking or to think about something differently or, whatever. We never know what effect our words are going to have on other people.
And I think that's the most important thing. A lot of people that I've talked to, they are doing what they're doing, whether it's being bold on social media or writing a book or memoir in hopes that it will help people. And then they see their followers and it's not that much. And they get discouraged. And they see their book sales and it's not that much and they get discouraged. But they don't know the one person that their message landed exactly the way it needed to. And I think to myself, that's exactly why, that's what fuels me, is the idea that one person listening to one episode here's a message that lands exactly right in that moment. Dawn, tell me a little bit more about what it is that you actually do and how people can connect with you if they want to work with you.
So I am a copywriter by trade and funnel strategist and builder. More recently, in the last year, I've done a lot more with AI. So as it's a big topic of conversation now, and it's amazing. It really is truly amazing when you program it right. So I'm into custom GPTs and using those to program for the voice of someone, their brand, their target market, like very specific, so that we're talking just to certain people because everyone's different. So, talking to, say a Christian woman who's in her 30s versus someone who's sober in their 50s, or, it's amazing how different people are and how differently we need to talk to them. And then it's also programmed with 75 years of direct response copywriting so that it actually sounds good and converts. So it's like this beautiful blend. What I was finding is, not everybody wants to hire a copywriter or wants to hand over their voice to somebody else. Although clients do still hire me for that, the main thing I do now is install what I call the voice print system, which is a team of 8 GPTs that are programmed just for them. So most of my clients can't tell the difference between what they would say or write and what the GPTs write because they're so highly programmed in technology. It just blows my mind all the time. I'm like, we live in an amazing time where we can get the speed of AI, but also have it not sound at all like AI. Because we all know, we see that and we're like, oh, you kind of cringe at how much AI content is out there. So I'm a champion for AI, but doing AI differently and doing it well. Yes. Because I think that when we do that, we can reach more people. I mean, my whole goal and that has always been part of my mission as a copywriter, is impacting millions, because all of my clients are transformational leaders. So they're speaking on stages, they're coaching, and their influence is impacting many, many people's lives. So I'm like, if I can help amplify their voice, increase their followers and their sales and all of that, it's like I get to be part of this really cool ripple effect where it is all the kinds of transformation. So it's been an amazing journey and such a blessing to be part of it and to get to be part of helping other people find their voice and then amplify it in a way that's actually efficient. And one thing I didn't mention in the voice print system is also, and I don't know if we did talk about this in our DMs, but I also integrate the 5 neurochemicals that influence buying behavior, which you would be familiar with some of the neurochemicals because of addiction. So words trigger the same neurochemicals as drugs and alcohol, just in a different way. So we have cortisol, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And good copy triggers all 5 in that order. So I have also this added layer that the nerdy scientist in me is like, oh, we also bring this into how you tell your story, and making sure that those neurochemicals are triggered as we tell stories, which is really powerful. And then more people's lives get changed. So
Dawn, you are like speaking my language, because my day job is I'm a speaker coach, and everything you said is exactly what I'm working on. The idea of finding somebody's authentic voice, the idea of helping them to present information in a way that it influences buying behavior and or learning behavior and or change behavior. And I too get so geeked out by the neuroscience pieces of it. It's like, it's our magic wand. If we understand how the brain functions, I call it the inner drugstore.
I like that. Inner drugstore.
and then leverage that, we can make change happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of wraps back around to this whole story of amplifying sober voices as well. It's like, what can we do to help change more lives? I love that. So as I sit with this conversation, what really stands out to me is this. I think so many of us think we need to add something to be qualified, like more credentials or more polish or more confidence. But what Dawn is pointing out to us is the opposite, that the very parts of our story that we were taught to minimize are often the parts that make us more trustworthy. And that telling your sober story isn't about performance or about, vomiting all of the things. It's actually about permission to connect.
Mhm.
And if this episode stirred something in you, you don't need to do anything big. Just maybe notice, what are you editing about yourself out of your own story? And what might shift if you trusted that your lived experience, exactly as it is, could actually be enough?
Mm.
Dawn, thank you so much for this conversation
Yes, thank you.
and reminding us that our story isn't just decoration, it's actually our identity and it's our connection. And it takes courage.
For
And to
sure.
everyone else listening, thank you for being here. If this episode resonated, please like it, share it, and subscribe. Not because we need the numbers, but because there's somebody out there right now who this needs to land for. And they need to hear that their voice is valid. Thank you for listening to the Sober Life Rocks podcast.